Hello, good day, everybody. This is Raymond Sermonch Española of Surigao del Norte State University. This is the fourth installment of the lecture video series for GE Understanding the Self. And this is also the last lecture video that is part of Unit 1. No? Unit 1 of this course is intended for the exploration of various scholarly perspectives on the study of the self. The first one was the philosophical perspectives, followed with um, sociological perspectives, and then psychological perspectives. In this last lecture video for that unit, we explore several perspectives: Eastern philosophical perspectives, cultural perspectives, even indigenous local perspectives such as Sikolohiyang Pilipino, and a brief lecture regarding Filipino virtues, hoping that we can establish our understanding of the Filipino self. Okay? Just a just to prepare everybody, kindly answer these questions. First, can you define individualism and collectivism? Do you know any countries or cultures that are generally considered individualistic or collectivistic? Have you heard of these terminologies in the past, or this is your first time? What do you understand by the terms Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy? Can you name key philosophers or ideas associated with each? I'll give you a clue. The philosophers we covered in the first lecture video are Western philosophers. Okay, so do you know of any person or any perspective that falls under the category of Eastern philosophy? Also, have you heard of Sikolohiyang Pilipino before? Filipino psychology? If yes, what do you know about it? And lastly, what do you understand by the term virtue? Can you name any virtue that are commonly discussed or valued in Filipino culture? As an outline, as an organizing outline for everybody, this will be the organization of the topics covered in this lecture video. For Eastern philosophies, it's just a tour of the 5 Eastern philosophies, and we'll end it with just a brief comparison of Eastern and Western philosophical perspectives. And then for cultural perspectives, we'll cover individualism and collectivism, and a little bit of independent and interdependent self-construals. And finally, Sikolohiyang Pilipino and the common Filipino virtues, which are founded on the concepts loób and kapwa. So these concepts are established through studies that belong to Sikolohiyang Filipino. And again, which made us, have better appreciation of what our identity is as a Filipino. So yeah, this is the concept map. Okay. So let's begin with this first section, just a tour, no? We'll going over or going through Eastern philosophies. We have here Confucianism, which is an Eastern philosophy that originated in China. Okay. Kung religion ba siya or Eastern philosophy, it's still debated up to today. But this Eastern philosophy focuses on inner virtue, morality, and respect for community values. Ang founder ani si Confucius, a philosopher and teacher who lived from 551 to 479 in the before BC, and his thoughts focus on ethics, good behavior, and moral character. Okay. So ang core beliefs jud niya is human-centered virtues, okay, for living a peaceful life. So ethical living. Very similar sa kang Aristotle, emphasis on virtuous life. Okay? So ingon pod sa Confucianist perspective, ang kaning golden rule na we don't want to do kaning do not do unto others what you would not want others do unto you. Okay? So we only do things unto others sa papaagi na unsa pod kita gusto na itrato ng uban. Okay? So if we want respect, if we want people to respect us, we should respect first, no? Kita dapat ang maguna, magpakita ana. So we don't impose things. Okay? So we just want to do things, or we just don't do things that other people would do unto us. Okay? So basically, this Eastern philosophical perspective is an ethical guide to life on how to nurture, how to develop a strong moral character. Okay? Walay God figure, but Confucius is worshipped as a spirit. Ang common rituals and practices involve ancestor worship and civic rituals performed in temples. And also this key philosophy within Confucianism is the idea of cosmic harmony, which posits that if the emperor possesses moral perfection, his rule will be peaceful and benevolent. And also, this perspective introduced the virtue of Ren, which is the virtue that leads to other virtuous behaviors like respect, altruism, and humility. So we need to cultivate this Ren through education. So kung ma-educate kita, ang purpose ng education daw, we get teachers to help us cultivate Ren, because cultivating Ren would allow for virtuous behaviors to be manifested by us, like respect, helping others, and being humble. Okay. Also central within Confucianism is filial piety or family-centeredness. Okay. So important ang ancestor worship, or putting greater importance sa parents, sa family, submitting to parental authority, and the use of family metaphors to describe societal structures. So ang obedience to parents important within Confucianism. Okay? Kung sa isulti ng parents, maoy rule, and morally obligated ang individuals as children to follow their parents' orders. Okay? And again, that's part of being virtuous in life. So ang part po ng virtuous behavior is when we obey, when we are obedient sa atong parents. Okay? And up to now, we still have people who follow consciously Confucianism. So na ay revival. So nag-coexist po siya with other Eastern philosophies. Next, we have Taoism. What do we mean by this? Taoism is also an ancient religion in China / philosophy linked to Lao Tzu. Okay? And ang text na maoy basis for this philosophy / religion is Tao Te Ching. Okay? Ang emphasis ani, kung ang Confucianism ga-emphasize ng respect for parents and virtuous life, cultivation of Ren, this time sa Taoism is living in balance with the Tao. And Tao means universe. Okay? Na ang isa sa moral obligation of each one of us is to always achieve balance of extremes. Okay? Na every experience na ay positive and negative, and we have to find the middle way. Okay? So Taoism teaches spiritual immortality where the spirit joins the universe after death. Okay? So wala po'y God, ani? Yeah, there are various gods that are part of the Taoist philosophy or belief, religion. So you often influenced by regional cultures in China. Ang Tao Te Ching, the writings, also known as The Way and Its Power, is a collection of poetry and sayings that serve as a guide for Taoist thoughts and action. And it's been attributed to Lao Tzu, so maoy author for cultural and political reasons, and he's sometimes considered an image of the Tao, or even to some extent, no, in certain occasions, God. Another central concept within Taoism is yin and yang, the concept of balancing forces, na ang universe na ay positive and negative. So kung na ay darkness, na ay light, kung na ay beautiful, na ay ugly, so kung na ay evil, na ay goodness, no? And let's say kung na ay male, na ay female, so kana siya, mga two opposing forces, and ang atong moral obligation is to always achieve balance sa kaning mga opposing forces. Okay? Taoism has its temples, monasteries, and priests who meditate, make offerings, and perform other rituals. Okay? So, gafay siya decline, pero naapay kihapoy modern day Taoists karon. And like Confucianism, ang Taoism also coexists with Buddhism and Confucianism. Kaning Buddhism is a philosophy or religion founded by Siddhartha Gautama in India. No? Na later on, ni spread across Asia. India ba ni? Okay. Just originating in Southeast Asia. Core beliefs. Buddhists believe that human life is a cycle of suffering and rebirth. However, they also believe that it is possible to escape the cycle through enlightenment or nirvana. Buddhism does not involve the worship of deities, but acknowledges supernatural figures who can either aid or obstruct the path to enlightenment. Okay. Siddhartha Gautama was a prince who renounced his wealth to seek enlightenment. And katong akong na-mention a while ago na middle way can also actually mas maklasify siya as a Buddhist philosophy na similar siya sa Taoism, ga-promote or ga-advocate po siya ng balanced approach sa life. Okay? So Siddhartha Gautama experienced enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, and the site now is a major pilgrimage location. So mao ni ang unique. So kung naa sila similarity sa Taoism, mao ni ang unique about Buddhism, that there are truths in this world na ingon ang Buddhists. All humans suffer in some way. Each one of us na atay kaugalingong suffering. No person is ever free of suffering. Tanan na ay unique personal sufferings. And then, kaning suffering asa nigikan from desires. diba? So na ay mga common, mga expression sa mga katiguyangan, and I believe you also have appreciation of this saying na murag ang tao walay katagbawan. So sa una ganahan, you aim for this na makakaon ra kag 3 times a day. Tapos ang tao nakakaon na 3 times a day, gusto ni sila dagko na sweldo. Tapos once na ma-achieve na niya ijang gusto, kinahanglan pa niya more and more and more. So tungod aning endless desires, people suffer, no? So mauna nga maskin kwartahan, naa pa man gayud na sila yung mga desires, nagpadayon ang suffering. And also, part of Buddhism, ang belief nga it's possible to end that. And the only way to end that is the middle way. Okay? So when we are able to find the middle way, balance sa kaning pagbalance sa aning atong mga desires, no? Moderation, laong pa. That's the path to enlightenment. Okay. Buddhism also believes in karma, where one's actions in the past or past lives can impact their future. And there are several schools of Buddhism: Mahayana, Theravada, and Vajrayana. So you just read these terms. And also this Dalai Lama, the head of Tibetan Buddhism. So currently we have the 14th reincarnation, and has raised questions about his future reincarnation. Fourth, Eastern philosophy, Shintoism, which is unique in Japan. Ang unique aning Shintoism is it's a Japanese religion, ancient Japanese religion that focuses on the worship of spirits, of natural kaning kami, natural spirits, no? Mga elements, natural elements like the sky, earth, and storms. Wala siya fixed dogma, wala siya libro. So kung sa Confucianism, sa Taoism na sila reference materials, or let's say a collection of poetry and teachings, Shintoism doesn't have any of that. Okay? Shinto was coined in the late 6th century AD to distinguish it from Buddhism and Confucianism. So initially, na-overshadow siya ng Buddhism, pero tong 18th century, na-revive siya as a unique Japanese Eastern philosophy / religion. Okay. So maura ni ijang unique jud na kaning pag-worship sa vast pantheon of spirits or kami, which are mainly divinities personifying aspects of the natural world. So matong sky, even fire. The practices involve prayers of thanksgiving, offerings of valuables like swords and cloth, and purification rituals. And we have the modern day Shinto as well, no? Kaning after the World War II. Nag-continue gihapon siya pag-exist. And naana po siya murag Confucian aspects. So kaning Confucian ethics na being kaning pag-value sa role ng parents or pag-recognize sa authority ng parents and the importance of virtuous life. Okay? So daghan siya karon mga consciously ga-follow ng kaninga philosophy, Shintoism. Last one, Hinduism. Hinduism is a major world religion originating from the Indian subcontinent. Okay, and diverse ang range of philosophies and beliefs ng kaninga religion. Okay, the term Hindu was initially used by early travelers like the Greek and Persians to describe the inhabitants of the Indus Valley. But over time, the term evolved to signify a religious identity rather than an ethnic or geographic one. Okay? Unsa may core beliefs and practices aning Hinduism? Wala po siya single founder, wala po siya sacred text or reference or set of beliefs. Ka-incorporate lang siya ng various kaning lessons, various texts from the Vedas and the Upanishads and practices such as yoga and meditation. Okay? So, kaning in spiritual enlightenment, devotion, knowledge, and disciplined action. Okay? In the modern day period, Hinduism has been subject to various reform movements and has played a significant role in India's struggle for independence. Okay. So, as a focus on the theme, so may commonalities, or how do we distinguish these five Eastern philosophies from one another? Sa Confucianism, it's clear nga ang emphasis niya is moral integrity, cultivation of friend, and emphasis on social harmony, especially recognition of parental authorities, family values, family responsibility. Taoism is focused on the way, the middle way, the Tao, the natural order of governing things, that we need to be united with the natural flow of things. Buddhism is katong truth regarding suffering stemming from desires, and we also need to achieve kaning middle way in order to achieve balance and end our sufferings. And for Shintoism, our association with natural elements like sky, water, etc. And Hinduism, the beliefs of righteousness also can be traced to Confucianism, diba? As mentioned, wala siya fixed set of beliefs, no? Karma can also be connected to Buddhism, and moksha, liberation from the cycle of rebirth. Okay? So essentially, kung ato nang i-compare sa Western perspective, let's say we have this question, is there a single God or many gods? So kasagaran, kaning sa Eastern perspective, generally, ang Eastern philosophy, ang ilang view is polytheistic or non-theistic. Walang gani kita polytheistic, daghay ginalantaw or gina-view nga God. Kung non-theistic, no God at all. For example, Confucianism, wala sila'y God, no? Wala sila'y image, wala sila'y belief of the existence of God, but they promote actively, consciously, kaning virtuous life. Okay? Also, the other Eastern philosophy sa kaning Taoism, so ga-promote sila nga na ay various gods. Okay? Polytheistic. Kung mobalik ta sa Western philosophies, so medyo nag-vary pod, pero ang prominent is katong philosophies nila ni Saint Augustine and Saint Aquinas nga there is only one God. Okay? Pero syempre, David Hume explained regarding skepticism that we need to be skeptical, we need to doubt, we need to question if God really exists. And Plato and Aristotle posited a prime mover, but were not strictly monotheistic, so diverse. Nature of reality. So kung ari sa Eastern perspective, life is often considered as a cycle of life and death. Reality is cyclic, na ay rebirth, pwede ma-reincarnate. Pero kung ari kita sa Western philosophies, ang reality is just linear, no? Unchanging reality. So for example, in Christian philosophy, na ay beginning, na ay end, diba? So that's just a linear view of reality or of life. Okay? So, when we die, there is another, di na kita ma-reincarnate, no? There's, ato na kita sa mo unite sa atong creator. That is in the case of Christian philosophies. Pero syempre si Plato also had theory of forms, positing an eternal unchanging reality. Aristotle focused on empirical reality, and Descartes doubted everything except his own existence. And Merleau-Ponty emphasized bodily experience. So mauray important. However, there is a nature of reality for Eastern. It's always a cycle, phases, natural phases. Moral and ethical framework. So sa atong nakita, though quick lang and brief lang ang atong tour on the five Eastern philosophies, kasagaran ang view nila, ang view sa Eastern perspectives is kaning pag-focus sa balance and harmony in order to end our suffering and in order to be virtuous in life. And we also saw some aspects of that, especially there is kang Socrates, Kant, Saint Augustine, and Saint Aquinas. Focus on the individual and on the community. So dili kita mas ma-appreciate ang difference because kasagaran aning sa Eastern perspectives mas gahatag siya ng greater importance sa family, social harmony, consideration ng ubang tao, 'di ba? For example, atong do not do unto others what you don't want others do unto you, Confucianism. So dapat ang atong pag ang atong pagka-virtuous in life is always in consideration of how we affect others and how others might affect us. Diba? That's a sense of community. That's a sense of family. And nakita po na sa ubang Eastern perspective, no? Kaya 'di ba as mentioned sa Hinduism, there are also some parts of Confucianism and the same with Shintoism, no? However, sa Western perspectives, siguro nakitaan nato ang early Greek philosophers ng little emphasis on sense of community. If you remember, Aristotle mentioned that human beings are political animals, which means that we are people who are members of the society. No? But generally, most of them focused on the uniqueness, no? Individual moral duties. For example, si Socrates, how do we go about understanding ourselves? That is only knowing ourselves. Okay. Know thyself. So, pero, syempre, you can't also miss that Socrates mentioned that we can understand ourselves through the Socratic method, where we need to engage in constant questioning and interactive questioning with others. Pero, siya in that case, we need to socialize in order to understand ourselves. Okay, so medyo individualist ang orientation. Merleau-Ponty considered the individual as embedded in the world. No? Kanapod. Approach to knowledge, experiential and intuitive. So, ga-promote ng meditation, spiritual experience, and experience. So, same dito kang Socrates, dialectical. Descartes employed doubt to arrive at certainty. Hume, skepticism. And Kant, reconciliation of empiricism and rationalism. Ang role of rituals so far sa Western philosophies, medyo diri lang sa Christian philosophies, but less on other philosophers. Mas integral ang rituals diri sa Eastern perspectives. Ang most common aning meditation, and kaning other spiritual practices. Okay, now let's consider cultural frameworks. Naatay duha ka framework na usually ginagamit to explain cultural differences ng mga tao. So usually aning culture pod kaning ga-refer sa regions of the world, no? So we have individualism and collectivism, and independent self-construal versus interdependent self-construal. Kaning individualism and also independent self-construal, though they're different. They're both considered predominant in Western countries such as the US, Canada, and most Western European nations like the UK, Germany, and France. Okay, so when we say predominant, so mas mo patigbabaw ang kanina mga tendencies. Okay, tendency to be individualist, tendency to construe the self as an independent self. On the other hand, ang kaning collectivism and interdependent self-construal, again, these are different concepts, but they're both considered as predominant in Eastern countries like Japan, China, South Korea, as well as in some African and Latin American countries. Okay? So unsa may pasabot di ay aning individualism and collectivism. So these two things are opposite, of course. Kung ang tao or ang culture, okay, if the culture, if the region, if the country is individualist, that means people are considered as autonomous entities with distinct, unique identities. They have personal goals, rights, and freedoms, which are important in defining their self-concept. Okay. That implies that there is a strong emphasis on self-reliance. So, maubitaw nang sa America, for example, they put strong value on being individualist, being able to sustain yourself the moment you reach a certain age, usually 18, or when you are a young adult, you're expected to leave the household, no? You're expected to go out sa shelter ng imo parent and ikaw na yung magbuhi sa imong kaugalingon. That is self-reliance. Okay? And there's also emphasis on personal freedom and individual rights. And as you might have realized, ang kaning, for example, freedom to label oneself in terms of gender, kung man ba, cisgender, woman, transgender, queer, non-binary, and other terms, these are usually enjoyed by people in cultures or countries that are individualist because, again, they put strong importance, greater importance on personal freedoms. Okay. And also, decision making is often based on personal benefits. So we do things, we take action depending on whether we can benefit from that. Okay. So always the personal gain. And that's normal for them. Okay. On the other hand, collectivism, it's always the group, the family, the community, your social organization is always the primary unit of consideration. Ang atong identity, ang atong individual identity is usually based on the group of, let's say, the group kung asa ta nabilong. Okay? So kung asa ta gikan or unsa atong clan. Okay, essentially, sa term na collectivism, ang kaning community, how ang kaning collective, ang imong grupo, diha ang strong emphasis. So, kung ang mga tao sa individualist na culture ga-emphasize on self-reliance, diri sa culture nga collectivist, ang emphasis is group harmony and consensus. So, we don't, kaning mga tao sa collectivist cultures, mas i-prioritize nila na mo-avoid ng gubot. Okay? Mas hanapon nila ang mga pamaagi para ma-maintain ang kahapsay. Okay? So, amo na nga kasagaran daw. Excuse me. Kasagaran, kasagaran, dili confrontational daw ang mga tao sa mga collectivist na cultures. Kaya syempre, maglikay man tagubot. And also there is a strong emphasis on collective responsibility and group welfare. So you can connect this actually sa Confucianism. no, sa Confucian perspective on filial piety, kaning paghatag ng importance sa virtuous life na you just maintain harmony sa imong community, no? Do not do unto others what you don't want do unto you. So, ang decision making kasagaran pod kay kung unsay maka-benefit sa tanan, 'di ba? So lahi tong sa decision making based sa kung unsay makuha ng individual person. On the other hand, kaning alternative na framework, independent versus interdependent self-construal, ang difference ani niya sa PICAS is katong individualism and collectivism are used to describe cultures. Kani are used to describe individual self. Okay? So kaning independent self-construal, the self is considered as a self-contained entity. So actually, medyo overlapping po siya sa individualism nga cultural perspective. No, the self is defined based on internal attributes such as own thoughts, feelings, and actions. So when the person nga naay dominant nga independent self-construal, ang iyang description of him or herself is nakabase sa personal traits. Like, pangutanon nimo siya, how do you describe yourself? So, typically, maingon siya, mogamit siya characteristics, descriptors, nga kung unsay nakapayunik sa iya. Okay? On the other hand, kaning interdependent self-construal, the self is construed as being part of a larger social network. So again, naana pod siya overlap sa collectivism. So kung ang self nga interdependent ang self-construal would usually define him or herself in a manner that emphasizes social roles, duties, obligations, or group membership. Okay. So, kung pangutan-on daw ang tao nga taas-taas ang level ng iyang interdependent self-construal, they would say, I am the son of this person and this person. So, iyang parents kibali. So, instead na maingon siya, I am beautiful, I am talented, which are, unique attributes of the person. Kana common na sa tao nga taas ang independent self-construal. So kaning taas ang interdependent self-construal, the self is understood, the self is defined using relationships, social roles, and mutual obligations. So actually, pwede na nimo itry sa imong kaugalingon after having learned these terms. If pangutanon mo, how do you describe yourself? Or in the past, if you remember an instance when you were asked to define or describe yourself, no? Tell me, for example, a simple prompt saying, tell me about yourself. How did you respond to that prompt? Diyan sa man mo pag-describe ang imong self. So most likely, kung ang imong ingon, kung taga-asa ka, kung kinsa imong best friend, unsay trabaho sa imong parents, unsa ang kind of life ninyo. So really, mga descriptions of who you are in terms of your family and friends and connections. Posible taas kag interdependent self-construal, lesser ka sa independent. Pero kung mas taas kag independent self-construal, so lahi ang imo tubag sa question nga tell me something about yourself. Kay ang imong posible ang imong mga accomplishments, personal accomplishments, ang imong talents, ang imong unique na mga physical characteristics. So I am tall, I am unique, I can do this, I am skilled at doing this, I can unurakan diha ng mga feats that you can do. Okay? So syempre, na ay mga laong pa drawbacks kay this is common probably ijuning na encounter na when the self is explained from a cultural perspective, Murag moingon jud, 'di ba common sa atong example ganiha nga mga people in people in America, people in the US, mga they emphasize on self-reliance. So, ingon sila that can cause problems. So, mao ni na ay critiques sa paggamit aning individualist collectivist na framework or independent or interdependent framework because when we use these terminologies, it can lead to overgeneralization and formation of stereotypes. Okay, syempre, there are certain instances also karon, let's say in our local culture, though um, the Philippines can be considered as an Eastern country. Naapoy instances where ga-emphasize na kitag self-reliance, no? So kana siya. And even in the US and other Western parts of the world, so naapod sila instances where they put value on social harmony, membership, and also problematic po siya gamiton because there's some assumption of static nature nga ang nature ng self is relatively stable, which is not the case. 'Di ba? So remember, ang cultures karon dynamic and ga-change because of social media, because of globalization, because of people moving from one places to another in, you know, in kanang more frequent na mga travel. So possible na ang interaction ng mga tao from different countries. So ang sharing of values, whether they are independent or in the individualist or collectivist or interdependent, medyo mag-blur na ang boundary. So murag never na gud kita makaingon nga kaninga person fully independent ang self-construal. Kanina person fully interdependent because again, we interact with people of various cultural backgrounds. Okay, so there's no need to criticize. So kung naay ma-encounter nato nga individualist ang batasan, so we don't say ay because of colonization, because of colonial mentality. It's just the normal course of events nga ana gyud na ang cultures mag-change, not static. And lastly, kaning neglect of intersectionality, kaning kung mo gamit lang ta kaning nga mga frameworks, independent self-construal, interdependent self-construal, individualism, and collectivism, puro lang siya cultural definition of the self and does not consider how other factors like race, gender, social class intersect with cultural constructs of the self. No? Kay when we describe ourselves, dili man all the time gina-describe nato ang self from a cultural perspective. We use other perspectives, let's say from a philosophical standpoint, from a sociological standpoint, from a psychological standpoint, or even, using other descriptors like mentioned earlier, katong gender and social class, or even your religion. No? So dili man siya necessarily murag again related sa kaning ma-simplify ang imong self-understanding. So now let's turn to this question. Kinsa man ning Filipino self? Unsa ning Filipino self? Using the cultural perspective, after having learned of the differences between individualism and collectivism and independent and interdependent self-construal. Generally or predominantly, is the Filipino self collectivist or individualist? Is it construed as independent or interdependent? Saka, so I'll ask this question in class. But now let's turn to the last section, Sikolohiyang Pilipino and Filipino virtues. Sikolohiyang Pilipino is a response to Western-oriented psychology that dominated in the Philippines in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. No? People were satisfied. Early psychologists were not satisfied. Were not satisfied of kaning mga theories, kaning mga frameworks of understanding the Filipino self using foreign na mga theories, no? So, di ba, kung makadumdum mo aning Jose Rizal, our national hero, and also Apolinario Mabini, they're the first people who expressed dissatisfaction sa mga pamalakad ng foreigners in the country. The same po na sa nahitabo in the 1960s and 70s na ang mga libro na gamit, ang mga ginaklase, mga examples, mga 'di ba, mga early teachers ang ilagamit na example sa pagbilang, let's say 1 apple, 2 apples, tapos walay gani apple in the Philippines. So things like that, no? Na kanang gina-train, gina-educate ang Pinoy using foreign examples or examples which are not even true to the Filipino experience. Diha po nagsugod ang Sikolohiyang Pilipino. Okay? Na ang Western frames of thinking won't be enough to understand the Filipino self. And ang leading figure behind this movement is Virgilio Enriquez. Siya nag-introduce aning concept or movement nga Sikolohiyang Pilipino. So basically, kaning Sikolohiyang Pilipino aims to understand Filipino behavior or Filipino self from our own Filipino perspective. Okay? So it's an incorporation of indigenous concepts like diwa, focus on diwa, kalooban, and kamalayan. So may kamalayan in English, that's consciousness. Ang kaning kalooban, kaning mabuting loob, that's your mga positive motives. Ang imong diwa is your essence, or in indigenous language, mauna imong soul. Okay? And philosophically, Sikolohiyang Pilipino is rooted in empiricism, rationalism, and liberalism because, as mentioned earlier, this was a movement that aimed to liberate Filipino scholars wanting to understand the Filipino psyche, using indigenous concepts and freeing the study from the use of Western frames of thinking. So ga-emphasize siya national identity, social awareness, and the psychology of language and culture. And lastly, protests against psychology that perpetuates colonialism or exploitation. So therefore, ang isa sa mga ang main takeaway really ng movement in the 1960s and 70s, kaning movement nga Sikolohiyang Pilipino, is if there was ever a need to understand the Filipino self, there is a need to understand our culture, who we are as a culture, who we are as a nation, our experiences during the colonization period or the years when we were under the colonizers from Spain and the US. We need to be culturally sensitive in order to understand the Filipino self. We need to be aware of our authentic experiences in order to understand the Filipino self. And that leads us to Filipino virtues. Okay, syempre, knowing our history as having been colonized by Spain and the US, according to Reyes, ang atong Filipino virtues are a blend of Eastern and Western traditions. So remember, kung moingon kitag ang Western, the focus on individualism, uniqueness, ang Eastern mga traditions ka focus on social harmony, acceptance, relationships. So maupod ang makita sa atong Filipino virtues. So ang atong mga guides sa atong pagkandak sa atong virtuous life. Okay? So kaning atong Filipino virtues are rooted in two major concepts of Sikolohiyang Pilipino. We have loób, which refers to our inner self or will, which acts as a potential of the soul driving ethical behavior. So, pwede po ni ma-consider na imong konsensya. So, ang imong loob, kay naa sa imong heart or naa sa imong brain. Okay? Kapwa refers to the other, emphasizing the importance of relationships. So, it's natural for us na naatay konsensya, naatay inner self, and naatay orientation towards others. Okay? So, murag naapoy implication nga ang Filipino, the true Filipino self is the self that is oriented towards pagkakaisa, oneness with kapwa. Which brings us to kaning unsa rin na mga Filipino virtues. We have 3 here. Naatay tagtawag na pakikiramdam. So in the Western tradition, that's considered prudence, no? And that's dominant in Filipino culture. Kaning the need to be relationally sensitive, no? So dili ka magpatakag istorya nga maka-hurt sa ubang tao. So, kay dapat makiramdam ka. So kung kabalo na ko ang isa or na-hurt na ang isa, you stop saying things or words which, kanang hurtful sa ubang tao. Okay? And also, you bring yourself with decency. Kay kung naa ka sa formal event, so dapat makiramdam ka na dapat dili ka kanang tudag boses, no? Ang prudence. That's prudence, no? Na nag-exist siya sa Western world and also nag-exist pa siya sa ato, sa Philippines. Though Eastern country kita. Okay? Kaning hiya is also a good example of a blend of Eastern and Western traditions. Sa Western tradition, ang hiya just translates to shame or embarrassment. Kanang masipgan, masipog. Diba? Di ka mosulti sa klase kay masipog ka. Or maulaw ka. Kung magkamali ka, syempre ay kaulaw. Matod, di ba? Pero in the Philippines, considering the history that we went through, ang hiya na ay another meaning. Hiya can be considered as a form of self-control to prevent causing shame to others. Okay? Kanang, for example, sa may example na atong pwede maisip na kanang murag dili ka mo attend ng party, di ka mo attend ng birthday celebration kung dili ka invited. That is hiya. Diba? You control yourself. Kaya syempre, waya man ka tag-invite, di ka mo kadto. Waya man kay amot, di ka mo kadto. That is hiya. Diba? You don't want to shame others. No? You don't want to put others in an awkward position. So, dapat nakakahiya. So, again, naa siya two meanings. It's either ikaw ang masipog or ikaw na gusto na maglikay na masipgan or ma-awkward ang uban. Okay? And then we have lakas ng loob or bahala na. This translates to courage or fortitude. Kaning strong spirit. Pero, dili po na necessarily kaning fatalism na kanang mo adto kag, let's say mo exam ka, wala kay study. So, di ba moingon kag bahala na. That is fatalism. Pero it can also be viewed as a positive confrontation of uncertainty. So, marag bahala na. So, you just put trust in the Lord, for example. na kay source of strength na i-guide ra kan ka sa imong mga buluhaton, sa imong mga task, or sa imong taken nga mga challenges. Okay? And we have other Filipino virtues, utang na loob, debt of gratitude. Again, still rooted sa loob na concept ng Sikolohiyang Pilipino. A sense of obligation to reciprocate favors and kindness received. Remember, pwede po ni mag-refer sa Eastern philosophy, particularly Confucianism, na katong atong filial piety, na we value so much our parents, or we should value our parents to the point na kung mahuman na ta pag-eskwela, makatrabaho na ta, na atay expectation na mag-return ng favor sa atong parents. No? Kaya sa Western countries, wala man na kaayo. No? Ang importante is self-reliance, kasagaran, no? But again, not everybody is like that. Pero diri sa ato, we have stronger emphasis on debt of gratitude. Pakikisama, getting along, that there's a need to maintain social harmony. So, and then kagandahang loob, goodwill, innate kindness and generosity without expecting anything in return. And pakikipagkapwa, treating others as equals regardless of social status. So mauning makita sa hospitality, openness to others, and so on. Okay? Now, in closing, based on our shared history, our shared Filipino virtues, the Filipino self is best construed as a blend of Western and Eastern influences, balancing our individual, unique needs, wants, wishes, drives, and we balance them with social expectations, the need for harmony, the need for filial piety, the need to achieve balance. No? So for example, hiya, both a form of self-control and negative emotional experience, depending on the context. And on the other hand, the Filipino self is inherently relational, emphasizing virtues that foster strong interpersonal relationships and community bonds. So that is, we tend to focus more on communal well-being over individual gain. So, pakisama, utang na loob. But again, remember, the 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 issues that I shared earlier, that kaning ang world, ang culture is change constantly, no? Because of social media and so on. So we really don't expect our self-conception to be static. We don't expect our understanding of the self as fixed. Naajoy daghan na mga factors na, mga influences sa media in particular, na mag-introduce sa changes in how we construe ourselves. But for now, we can say confidently that yes, there's a blend of Eastern and Western influences. Tapos na ay Taoistic principle nga need to balance what you want for yourself and what you want for your family and other social relationships, and that we are more oriented with relationships. Okay? So naiuban mga tao dili na into relationships, probably because of negative experiences sa ilang family in the past, or mao na tong exposure sa social media and other things. But in general, mao daw ning atong kaning conception of ourselves. Blend of the East and West and relational. Okay? So I end this video with reflection questions. How do you compare Eastern and Western philosophies based on what you've learned? What are some potential drawbacks of using frameworks like individualism and collectivism? And how does Sikolohiyang Pilipino make you feel about being Filipino? Remember, ang iyang gusto, ang iyang emphasis is katong loob and kapwa, and the liberation from colonial from colonialism, from frames of thinking that perpetuate colonialism, and how the Filipino virtues like pakikiramdam, hiya, and bahala na influence your personal decision-making and interactions with others. Thank you so much for watching this lecture video.